How can we teach people who want to know about this critical thinking stuff more about it, especially young people? Well, firstly, don't. Don't teach them, as in don't force instruction on them unless they ask. That's part of the anti-critical problem. A person needs to have a problem in the first place, their problem. Someone has to ask you first for help. But when they do ask about something, then the conversation can begin about how we can come to know this thing, that thing, or anything else. And what I'm about to say comes with an important caveat I will return to at the end. There is actually no formula to being a good critical thinker. There is no fixed set of rules, or even, as I will say, heuristics. There are some useful hints, but learning these by rote would be anti-critical. Any university can provide you with a list of critical thinking techniques. I think they're mostly largely misguided. Again, I'll come back to that. But what I want to do here is concentrate on criticism, broadly speaking. What are the modes of criticism that can be employed to actually help someone be a critical thinker rather than just achieve better marks or fulfill the requirements of some task undertaken at school or university which asks them to engage critically or use their critical thinking skills? Depending on the level that someone is at, let's consider a teenager. I find a two-step process useful in guiding the capacity to think critically about any topic. Whether it is something in the media or something in a book or something you are trying to learn, here's my 2 steps. Step 1. Assume that what you are being presented with is false. Step 2. Find out why. So those are my 2 steps. This is not to say that you will find out why it's false. That's just an assumption after all. In reality, many times what you are learning is the best present understanding of a thing. But the very act of trying to uncover what is false about an idea reveals what is most true about an idea, or nearer to true about an idea. If some claim fails to be refuted by your attempts to find out why it's false, in other words, if an idea survives your criticisms, you've learned a lot. Now, trying to find out why some idea is possibly false entails quite a vast amount of creativity. It requires one to create criticisms. You have to create them in your own mind, but happily there are well-trodden paths worn by great thinkers who have gone before. Philosophy, the best sort, is a toolbox of criticisms. So is your own background knowledge. And of course there is the corpus of knowledge out there. You can check any claim you like against what else is known, and all of it in light of the deepest principles we have. Things that I have mentioned before, like whether there is a good explanation lurking behind it all. But if I were helping someone improve that general skill or set of heuristics we call critical thinking, I would ask them to begin by considering if the idea under review meshes well with all other important ideas. Is it strictly contradicted by anything you do know? If we cannot think of something, for example, if a news story says that a video has emerged from the forest of Canada purporting to show a non-human ape loose on a continent without apes, is the explanation that it is actually an ape, or that an error has been made? Are we contradicting what we know about apes loose in Canadian forests? Did it come from a zoo, or did it evolve there? Whatever the case, if we cannot find such a contradiction, or obvious contradiction, consider, does a law of epistemology contradict it? So, if it is a scientific claim, is it testable? But we can also consider, does a known law of science contradict it? Does it demand an infinite supply of instant energy? Does whatever you're being presented with assume the laws of thermodynamics are false? For some other claims, especially in the political or economic realm, we can ask of it, is it immoral? On balance, would it force free and peaceful people to do other than they would want to? Would it coerce them? On average, would it lower the well-being of all conscious creatures? Does it entail theft? And here are some other useful guides to being a good critical thinker in the critical rationalist tradition anyway. Does the idea rely solely, or to a large extent, or to any extent, upon an appeal to authority? Are we asked to believe it because some politician, priest, scientist, book or doctor just says it's true? Do you understand the idea? That itself is a criticism. That does not mean it is false, but if you do not understand it and you have tried hard, this is a criticism of the idea in terms of its expression. It may not have been properly explained to you, or it may not be sufficiently clearly expressed to you, which is related to, is the idea being expressed in simple language? This is related to an even deeper criticism, perhaps the deepest of all. I would call it Deutsch's anti-rational principle. The question here is, does this idea hold itself immune from criticism? I'll say it again. Does this idea that you're considering hold itself immune from criticism in any way? That is fundamental. That entails almost everything else once we have exhausted everything else and have thought of. It entails, is it clearly expressed? Does it stick its neck out in its predictions about the physical world? Does it claim to know things that cannot possibly be known, like the state of the planet next year or in 100 years? Is it a claim so general as to be vacuous and thus hold itself immune from criticism? For example, there should be no pollution, or the children are our future, or do what is right. So these are some of the ways criticism works. There are many, many more. One can consider the long and interesting list of so-called logical fallacies that can be found in many places on the internet. Just consider as many ways as possible that the idea is lacking or false. If it survives all of your attempts to criticize it, then it just might contain something worth knowing.